Hey, welcome everyone. In today's episode, we are going to unpack an interesting topic. I think everyone can relate easily well with this topic. I have a guest with me. I've known him for a few years now. He's a good friend, a good human being, most of all. Before I let him introduce himself, I want to talk about this topic. So, when you talk about leadership, it's not a straight line. It is living. It's breathing through journey of growth. It's all about mistakes. It's all about reflection. It's all about courage as well, right? Most leaders don't wake up one day and say, like, I'm the leader. I'm fully formed, right? They grow through experiences. They grow through uncomfortable ones. They grow through uncertain ones, right? That ones that force self-reflection. So in this episode, we're going to unpack how leaders evolve, not just in title, right? Like, I know a lot of people always chase for title, but not just in title or skill, right? But in mindset and heart, right? So we'll explore what it really takes to become a self-aware, authentic, and grounded leader. So the topic for today is unpacking the personal evolution as a leader. So I want to um, turn it over to my guest. Sri, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and we can dive into the topic?
Yeah, good morning, Anand. Thanks for having me on your podcast. My name is Sri Koneru, and first of all, I am a father of two boys, and that's probably the most important part of my identity. But after that, from a professional point of view, I have the privilege of being a CIO at Winnebago Industries and working with a great set of people, my teammates and I. We're striving to make change, bring technology capabilities and they're striving to help the organization grow through enablement of right technology at the right times.
Yeah, thank you, Sri. Thanks for accepting to be part of the show. I want to probably start with it's not a question, it's probably a statement, and then I want to hear your perspective as well. When we first step into leadership, or when anyone first step into the leadership, many of us will simplify or simply lead the way that we were led, right? So we follow our bosses and managers, and then learn something from them, and then when we become a manager, we probably try to mimic or probably implement whatever you learn from your previous managers or bosses. Sometimes without realizing it, sometimes you might probably like some of those behaviors because you've been always watching those mentors and managers. Um, and later you might realize, right, this is where the experience part of it will come into play, right? As you go through the journey, as you get some experience, you will change it, tweak it, and you may realize that, okay, you are not the same person, right? It may feel authentic if that person is doing it, but it may not be authentic when you are doing it, right? But I want to get back to what was the earliest version of yourself as a leader when you started your career as a leader, whether it is from an individual contributor to a leader or straight away into a leader? How do you describe as a person, right? What did leadership mean to you back then? And that's what I want to probably dive in, Sri, first.
Yeah, great question, Anand. I'll share my journey, and maybe this will jive with a few other folks. The word leadership, right? A lot of us, when we join a workforce, when we start talking about the word leadership, but we tend to forget, our lived and learned experiences as this child
Right.
growing through the journey of school and education, right? There is a lot of behaviors that you're actually either learning or you're being taught. So I'll start with the journey. So because again, I did not grow up in the Western culture. I grew up in India. So a lot of my formative years, those
Mm,
behaviors, which we sometimes, well, not sometimes, we equate to leadership. Leadership, shows up in your younger life as well too. A lot of those, my lived and learned experiences were from a culturally different lens as well too.
yeah.
Um, and I remember, I still vividly remember, to your point about mimicking. Humans are very good at mimicking. That's how we learn, actually, um, good and bad. I remember vividly, my first job out of college. I was working for a multinational company in India,
Hmm.
and this was a little bit, I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but back in the day, the leadership, the leadership behaviors exhibited and, expected when I joined the workforce in India are way different than what they are today. I would
Yeah.
argue leadership has actually evolved in the last 30 plus years. Um, and when I joined, I was also Anand, you know this, grown up in India, very hierarchical, even in the
Yes.
workforce.
Yes.
Less questions asked, more execution or more acting, acting as in acting on the tasks that were given to you. So if my boss said jump, I would go jump. My
Yes.
boss said, you go do this, I go do this, right? So that's how I kind of, that was my entry into the workforce. Um, it was very focused on execution, I call it, very task oriented. Um, and you earned your stripes in the early
Right.
part as you knew a topic or a subject in a problem solver. Everybody went to you for that problem solving. And as you go along on the journey, the initial part of my journey there, it was about just having control of the
Yeah.
tasks you have, being in control of those decisions for the tasks that you were given. That was
Yeah.
part of my early part of my journey, right? Very
Mhm.
focused on execution, driving for results, and less probably people oriented.
Yeah.
But I would argue, uh, that was again, that is not what I am today. As part of my journey, right? A lot of things
Mhm.
have changed.
Right. Yeah. I think well said, Sri. I think even I remember those days when the manager says something, we'll just right away jump into it and without even thinking about it, right? And sometimes we forget, okay, what does empower really means, right? Are we the order
Yep.
takers? We just go and do stuff. I think this is a good segue for people always think like, oh, this person is a C level now, this person is a CIO now, or this person is a CEO now, right? They always see the tip of the iceberg, right, if you will. The graph is not
Yep.
like this, right? I'm sure everyone might have gone through
Yep.
this.
It's
There is this kind of graph, but people always see the tip of the iceberg, right? Probably I want to go back to like I'll share my journey here a little bit. I think the real growth happens when some moments will really come and shake us, right? When something doesn't go as planned, and so when something do go well, when you have to take those hard calls, that is when you realize the leadership responsibility, right? Because this is where people always think this, but there's a sine curve to it, right? Um, one
Yep.
of the moment that I had as I was growing up as a leader is okay. We had this problem about okay, we have to solve this by bringing the teams together, but the teams were not in a position to solve all the problems because they were not used to working with each other. Now that became really really hard when the teams did not have a relationship with each other, and we want to bring them together to solve a problem, right? And that is a I kind of like a test for your leadership skill, right? To say how you can bring these teams together and make them towards work towards a common problem or common goal, right? Um,
Yep.
so that is when I realized, okay, leadership is not just about leading your team; it's about like bringing people along and have like a unified common goal and march towards one common goal and celebrate success together, not just with your team, not just your team success. I want to probably like turn it over to you. See, what was your defining moment when you said, or when you had that moment or a spark to say, "Yep, this really changed my behavior as a leader," or this changed how you lead your teams and others.
Yeah, great question. It's interesting. These pivotal moments or learning, moments kind of happen in everybody's career, right? Even as I sit here today, right, I still go through the same journey.
Yeah.
Uh, um, there are learning moments, that are sprinkled across. For me, I think that a kind of couple of places I'll highlight for me. This kind of happened, kind of shaped me. One is even as an individual contributor, that I had a burden on my shoulder on a big program.
Hmm.
I was, one of the key architects for one of the big programs, and um, and in that this again, I'll just get into a couple of details on the on the example here. Big program, a lot of eyes on it,
Yeah.
big dollars, and we were doing something, an implementation in the middle of the night, and I took because as the lead, I thought the burden was on my shoulders as a lead.
Sure. Sure.
I went ahead and did something that did not go very well, by the way. So in that case, I did the right thing by doing what I was supposed to do, but
Right.
the outcome it didn't turn out the way it's supposed to turn out.
Right.
For me, the acknowledgement for that was a turning point. For one of the learning points for me, or turning points as well, is the impact was high. Meaning, you're talking about in the previous employer, you're talking about their ability to bring their stores online would have been debilitated the next morning.
Sure.
In that example, I acted with speed, okay? Because I thought that was the right thing to do. I need to get this done before XYZ. What I did not realize is I should have included a couple more people in my decision making before I took that action. Okay. I use that as an example. As a key turning point for me is, I share with people, I made that mistake. I didn't get fired. Partially because I reflected on what I did wrong. Okay. And I reflected on what could I have done better, and took ownership of these are the things I could have done better, and made the right calls and right communication, and took ownership right away.
Right.
And that afforded me the opportunity. Luckily for me, I had great leaders. I've been always blessed with great leaders around me. And luckily for me, I was afforded that chance of failure. And somebody said, you know what? It's okay, you failed, but you actually recovered from it, because one is you took ownership. Second is you did get the right people to help you out to actually get out of the hole.
Yes.
So that was one key turning point for me. And that's when that was my formative years as an individual contributor. Even I had big scope and scale.
Right.
That big recognition around, guess what? You need to have the right people be engaged at the right times.
Yeah.
because you never know. Not one single person has all the answers all the time. When you get into a problem, when you get into a hole or conundrum, guess what? You have the right ecosystem engaged already for collective success.
Right. Right.
So that was one example. And the second example I use for myself that has helped me shape this, and I have a couple of moments like this. One is the hardest transition an individual makes in their career journey is when you go from an individual contributor to a first-time manager, and then a first-time manager to a leader of leaders. Okay, that is actually a hard transition. A lot of people. I personally, including myself, present company included, I did not focus as much. I thought it was, it's a straight line. No, it's not a straight line.
Right.
Your learned and lived experiences, right? You sometimes have to shape them a little bit, and, you have to work on them when you make the transition from being a manager to a leader of leaders.
Right.
And when I remember, again, when I became a leader of leaders, I was still, I would argue, predominantly doing exhibiting the behaviors, what made me successful for the last, as an individual contributor, as a manager, right?
Yep.
As a manager, you still tend to focus on, I call it performance, driving for results, right? But when you become a leader of leaders, you have to pivot predominantly to being people-oriented.
Yes.
Because that's how you're driving results. You're not driving results through your own self. You're driving results through people.
Yes.
Your teammates.
Yeah.
And I remember I was not very effective in my first, group manager role. I probably would, if I look backwards, I probably was not the most effective leader. And at that moment, luckily, I did have a mentor that actually did challenge me, coach me, counsel me, and to be honest with you, give me a kick in the pants a little bit. That
Right.
kind of opened my eyes. Guess what? I need to start I need to start looking at through this to a different lens, and more importantly, I need to learn and grow.
Correct. Right. Yeah. I think the mistakes are very much uncomfortable, right? When you shared that experience that you had as an individual contributor, I
Yeah.
also had a similar incident, but without going into the details of it, the pager days where you get a pager when there's a protection incident call. So
Yes.
I was an on-call support person like 20 years ago, for a newspaper company here. So I missed the pager, right? And then there was a protection incident, and the next day, Monday, I walked into the office. I was a consultant. That manager would have told me that, hey, you missed this. It was a critical incident. I thought I would be fired. But instead, the manager did not say anything, and then he took all the responsibility on his shoulders, right? To his leadership team, to the
Yep.
management. It was a big deal at that time. And I was like wondering, why did he do that way, right? I was like sleeping on it for a couple of days, and then I went and asked him on the third day, like, so why would you do this? Like, you should have told me that, I made the mistake. It's on me. And he was like, see, this is where when mistakes can happen. I know you made a mistake. I believe you. When there's a failure, I'll take the responsibility. When there's a success, I will leave it to the team. Right. So that stuck my mind really, really well. And that is very true. Like, not many leaders will acknowledge the fact that when you're sitting in front of your boss, or when you're trying to answer the question to the management team. Thanks for sharing that story, Sri. I want to probably segue into the mentorship aspect that you talked about, right? None of us grow in isolation, right? I'm fortunate to have the leaders that I worked with, the relationship that I build, the networking that I have is really, I'm really fortunate, right? Like, I have a good relationship with you, and the mentors are really good. You talked a little bit about the mentors, but how much influence you have from your mentors versus the leaders that you're currently working with? How do you balance those things? Because you might get different perspectives. That's why the mentors are for, because you might deal with an issue with your manager or with your boss, in a different way. Compared to your mentor, you can be a little bit open, you can brainstorm ideas, right? How do you balance those
Yeah.
approach between mentors and leaders?
Yeah. Great question. I, I, the way I think about that is mentors are there. They're not tethered to the program or project or the outcome, right?
Mm-hmm,
They're not
mm-hmm,
tethered to certain expectations that your, in a direct line supervisor or boss might have.
mm-hmm,
So I think everybody, doesn't matter what your scope and scale is, doesn't matter. I think all of us could actually always benefit
mm-hmm,
from having a mentor, a set of mentors. You have first one is have a trusted relationship, and then also more importantly, you respect as well too. You respect how they lead, you respect how they carry themselves, you respect how they're invested in your success. So I personally think everybody should have a mentor.
mm-hmm.
Mentorship goes a long way. Mentorship also gives you, finding the right set of mentors also gives you, it's a sounding board, right? That's really what it is. At the
Correct.
end of the day, none of us are born with all answers all the time. Our situations are always, fluid, changing. The culture you're working in is also different from place to place, right? What I think, what I've been I kind of been, benefited from is having a couple of mentors that know you as a human being,
Yep.
that know what your value system is, and they can coach you and counsel you and give you a sounding board to kind
Yeah.
of explore
Yep.
in a trusted place, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's true. And and when you grow as a leader, it's not about you probably learn new set of skills or inherit new set of skills for your leadership career path. It's also about letting go some of the old habits or some of the things that you've learned along the
Yes.
journey, and more importantly, the mindset. Right, you have to change your mindset, adapt to the organization that you're into, adapt to the culture that you're into. That is going to make you as a real, authentic, and effective leader. Right. Like I said,
Yes.
it's not about title. What is something that you have unlearned or released? Right, it is hard to unlearn what you've learned to become that effective and authentic leader. Right, it's easy to say, but it could be an ego thing. It could be
Nope.
something you believe that it is the one that worked for last 10 years, but you just need to completely get rid of those because you're getting into a new era. Right, what is something that you have unlearned
Nope.
over the period of time?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you're right. It's uh, part of the leadership journey is letting go.
Yes.
One of the biggest things that I had to let go is a couple of things. One is, I have to let go of wanting to be in control or knowing all the answers or being a fixer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because as I think, one of the reasons I had to let go of those is my ability to drive impact, my ability to, do a lot more and, contribute to the organization gets hindered
Right.
because they actually kind of, they're like, in some cases, they become time sucks. But
Yeah.
also, more importantly, they also don't enable you to basically grow the rest of your team, right? So I had to let go being, I call it being a fixer, meaning I am okay in my skin, in the later part of my journey as a leader to say I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
okay to say I can sit in a board meeting or a peer meeting, and if I generally don't have an answer, I'm okay to say I don't know the answer. Let me go find it out. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a big one that I had to let go.
Right. You would be
And
you
the
would be
second
you would
one
be
is,
grounded to say that though, right? You would be grounded, and you should
yes,
have
absolutely.
exactly. Yeah.
And the second one is decision making.
Mm.
You know, does every decision have to funnel? Because that's the biggest change you go in a leadership journey is in the early part of your journey, you're driving results, you're doing a lot of the stuff task oriented, activity oriented, and then you want to be in a little bit of control of decision making.
Yep.
But the second one is I only want to be in control. I should be in the middle of consequential decision making,
Mm-hmm.
right? The other ones I had to let go and empower my teams to actually make those decisions
Mm-hmm.
because I want to afford them the same opportunity as I was afforded as I was growing on my growth journey here by leaders, by mentors, and everybody else, right? I have to do the same thing for my teammates. Because if I do all of those, I am robbing them of the opportunity to make those
Right.
decisions and live in those decisions.
True. That is very true. So, Sri, I'm going to put you on spot. When you
Yeah.
look at your whole journey, right? If you could sit across your younger self just starting out, what is the advice that you would give to your younger self, right, in terms of what truly
Yep.
matters in leadership and growth?
Uh, Couple of things I will, as I reflect, about my, yeah. Oh, there's a lot of things I would give advice on. um, you know, I've always been curious. So one of the things I always doesn't matter what moniker you have next to you, right?
Yeah.
Always be curious in life. Okay. Doesn't matter you call it leader, manager's title, doesn't really matter, professional or personal, right? Be curious, be honest, be humble.
Yep.
That's what I would have kind of coached my younger self. Um, and then based on my lived and learned experiences, both in personal life as well as professional life in the last 30 years, um, I would advise, my younger self to focus on people, relationships, right? Driving impact and contribution through
Right.
people.
Right. Right. I think there's a lot of it's all about collection of lessons, right? Some learn the hard way, some through quiet
Yep.
reflection. I'm a big believer in reflection. It's all through human experience. I think the conversation that we just had for the last 25 minutes, I think that reminds me it's not about perfection. You don't need to be a perfect leader. It's
Nope.
all about evolution, right? You keep learning, keep curious, like you said. Um, Keep listening, keep showing up as a better version of yourself every day, right? That's going to be critical. Sri, I know I reached out to you and you immediately said yes. Thank you so much for that. This is where my gratitude goes back, right? And I'm grateful to have the people like you, right, in my network. Thanks for accepting to be part of the show. Thanks for the time, Sri.
Yep. Likewise, Anand, it's been a pleasure, right? You know, seeing you grow, seeing you take, I call it, what do you call, feedback, and also, you've grown leaps and bounds, and that's because you lead with your heart, you lead with passion, you lead with intent. And I again, every conversation you and I have, I get a chance to learn a few things from you as well too. So yeah,
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for those kind words, Sri. Thank you so much.
yeah, appreciate it.